All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see y'all back and you didn't exit to go to study. You're here with us because we're going to have the most intriguing panel of the afternoon. I'm setting the bar high. I'm going to set an expectation for the audience as well. When we get to questions, I want to see so many hands up with questions that we have to keep going on our questions, okay? So just so you also know my expectations, now everybody ready to go. So we're meeting at a time when there's a real sense of uncertainty and concern about where our democracy is headed. You've obviously heard this theme through the different panels, and confidence in our institutions is low and being tested. Many Americans are questioning whether the system still works for them, and both major political parties will go through periods of change in the upcoming months and years that could impact this next midterm election and obviously the next presidential election. The two-party system has been a defining pillar of our democracy for 150 years, shaping how we organize, how our parties are structured, how we vote, and how we govern. But like many of our democratic traditions, it's likely to evolve and continue to be challenged in response to the changing electorate, new technologies, and shifting political identities. So today we're going to dive into some questions with this panel, which I will do brief introductions for, since you now have met them, hopefully at least once across these 2 days. I'm going to start at the far end with John Anzalone. He's one of the nation's leading Democratic pollsters and messaging strategists with over 3 decades of experience guiding presidential, gubernatorial, and congressional campaigns. Please welcome John. There you go. Back to the stage. Joe McLean is a veteran Democratic strategist and campaign architect behind landmark victories from Barack Obama's Senate race to Doug Wilder's historic governorship, and is also a historian and like deep reader. You keep mentioning all the books on the panels, Joe. So welcome, Joe. There you go. Little energy, people. Let's do this. We have Sara Gongol, and a veteran Republican strategist who currently serves as executive director of the Republican Governors Association and is from the great state of Iowa. Right. Woohoo! And we have Meehan-Draper, a veteran Democratic strategist and executive director of the Democratic Governors Association. RGA, DGA is sometimes how we do that. And so with that, I'm going to kick off a question here. And, you know, with this upheaval and change that's afoot in both parties, what's the future of the two-party system and of each party itself? So I think, Joe, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I'll get out my crystal ball.
There you go.
Right
there you go.
Right here. Gaze deeply. As social institutions, the parties will continue to define broadly different views of what America should be and what we should do together as Americans. There's a really interesting article today by Robert Reich in the Washington Post about the differences in the parties and about how people think about parties. And his premise, and I think there's something to this, and our pollster could tell us more about that, but his premise is that people who are Republicans are generally more sympathetic to authority and order and structure, and people who tend to be Democrats are more sympathetic to different ideas, and they're more flexible about accepting people with different ideas, and they're more nurturing as opposed to more, he didn't use the word punishing, but I think that might be a good way to think about that. And if you think about the people you know, most of the people you know will tend one way or the other, right? And so I think that as you think about the differences in the parties, that's one way to think about the people who make up those parties. Because let's be real, any organization is just an amalgamation of individuals who are a part of that. And one other thing I would say is parties are not just social organizations that agree with different concepts and have different issues. Parties are organizations with legal structures and functions. They do things, and they do things in a certain way for certain purposes. And over the last 20 years, the way parties have functioned has changed because of the way they're funded. And I would say that parties now are much less powerful than they used to be, largely because of the Citizens United Supreme Court case, which limited the party's ability to raise and spend money, which has limited their ability to enforce discipline in their own ranks and with their own candidates.
Thanks, Joe. Sara, let's go on to you.
Yeah, I think the two-party system is what we have in America. It's here to stay. I mean, to Joe's point, you got to follow the money. And where is the money? The money goes to the Republican Party. The money goes to the Democrat Party, and all of its different affiliations underneath of it. And so we can talk about the individual parties like the Republican National Committee or the Democrat National Committee or the organization that I lead, the Republican governors, and what Meghan leads, the Democrat governors. Those are all different entities within each of the party systems. And they really are what help these candidates move forward. It's really hard to run as an independent in America because you don't have that supporting structure backfilling you. And it really is all about the financial needs of campaigns. And so without that financial backing, without that institutional structure, it's really difficult. Now, there are, the way finances have happened in our country have changed drastically over the last 20 years with Citizens United, Supreme Court case. There's actually a case right now that is challenging coordinated spending between campaigns and the political parties. And so if that goes down the way I think it's going to go down, which will strike out the coordination laws that you can't coordinate, it's going to change, again, how we spend money and how the parties operate. So we are looking at a weaker, national Democrat Party, a weaker national Republican Party, just from an infrastructure perspective. But the political parties themselves, like as an ideological right and left, they're not going anywhere. It's really, really difficult to run as an independent in our country.
John, you have anything to add?
Well, yeah. One is, I don't think that there is a national Democratic Party. There's just the perception of the Democratic Party that the Republicans have created for voters. And I think that's really important to know, right? The Republican Party right now is the party of Trump, and they have that is a perception. As long as he's doing well, fine. If he flounders, that's a problem, right? What I find really interesting is that when he goes off into the sunset, what will happen to the Republican Party? And I think what will happen is there'll be a freeing. People will be like, Republican in the Senate and states, et cetera, will all of a sudden, someone's going to have to fill a vacuum, and it's absolutely not going to be pretty. Both parties are going to survive. We've gone through ups and downs. I mean, the last time we really had a party leader in some ways was Obama, because Obama, once he became president, put an organization together called Obama for
Organizing for America.
Organizing for America, and he had a national political structure, right, that was created, and he kept engaging people. Didn't happen with Hillary, didn't happen with the Biden administration at all. They didn't have a political organization, right? And so, again, you got to nurture this. I mean, basically, national parties cannot just be money laundering operations where you bring in money and you put them out. And so what we have is the strongest democratic institution, and I'm not saying this just because she's up here, I love her, but it's the Democratic Governors Association, because what happens is that, what happens with a Democratic Party candidate, if you're running for Senate, governor, or Congress, or whatever, is that you don't want to be a national Democrat. You want to be a Michigan Democrat, you want to be a North Carolina Democrat, a Louisiana Democrat, et cetera. And so the Democratic Governors Association is so much more powerful than the DNC. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, with its offshoot, has a super PAC called Senate Majority PAC. They do their own thing, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And the Republicans have this structure too. It's just that they have a really strong umbrella structure, and his name is Donald Trump, right? And so their party means something. Doesn't mean that our party's dead. It means our party needs a lot of work to reconnect with voters, because right now the branding is really bad. And so what happens is that Roy Cooper in North Carolina will carry the mantle in North Carolina. Janet Mills will carry the mantle in Maine. And quite frankly, this is going to go on until we have a nominee in John Ossoff in Georgia. These are really strong Democrats. And so I'm kind of like not worried, but I'm worried, right? Because we still do have really positive things to hold our own. They just happen in the States.
Yeah, and I think most of you have jobs where you're paid to worry, right? That's just what you're.
No
paid
doubt
to
about
do,
it.
right?
We're cautious optimists at
Exactly,
best.
exactly. Megan?
I totally agree with what's been said. And to Sarah's point, it is very hard to run as an independent. Like you see all the time in polling that like when a candidate first gets in as an independent, people really like the idea of it and like they poll pretty high. But as you get closer and closer to election day, like their support just completely bleeds away and people end up going back to their corners, frankly. And they also don't have the sort of institutional support that comes with, being affiliated with the Democrat or Republican Party. I think obviously two-party system's here to stay. I think the parties are incredibly resilient. To your point, John, on Obama creating OFA, I mean, that is a testament to how resilient the Democratic Party is because OFA was a disaster for the Democratic Party. You know what I mean? It was like this parallel ecosystem, this parallel organization that tried to take on what the DNC was supposed to be doing and then sort of gutted funding from state parties. And in the meantime, Karl Rove, Operation Red Map's happening, Michael Steele's crushing the RNC. And then we have this like, short-term DNC like organization that was only in the image of a president who could not be president for more than 8 years. And it sort of just decimated what our party, what the DNC and state parties were supposed to be doing. And now it's gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. Like, what do we have to show for that? And so I think that's an example of what's that famous phrase from an actor that says, I'm not part of an organized party, I'm a Democrat. Or whatever. Anyway, so I'm bringing that up because despite all of that and despite how we sometimes, get a little unorganized, we are ultimately very resilient in the two-party system.
To add on to that, we are going to have a struggle, and this is credit to the Trump organization. They've created like this MAGA Inc. network. However, unlike OFA, they have really integrated with us and our committees and the party structures, and SLF, our Senate Leadership Fund, and CLF, the Congressional Leadership Fund. And so it isn't its own entity. It really, they've done a good job of helping to create that umbrella network because when Obama left office, he was such a charismatic candidate, charismatic president, promising hope and change. And then it was really hard for the Democrats, I think, to figure out what their voice was next. And he kind of stepped backwards into Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden. And so you had this like futuristic, charismatic leader and then went back to before. So we're going to have an issue with that as Republicans to make sure that we have our charismatic leader in Donald Trump, that we don't, go back and it would be like us nominating Mitt Romney again. Like it's not going to happen. I mean, it just, we have to figure out what the future looks like. And is that JD Vance? Is that Marco? Is that like who's going to fill that mantle? But I think some lessons we are learning and taking away from what happened when Obama left office and everything he did with Organizing for America.
Yeah, you make a really good point. The leader of the party is the national leader of the party. The person who sets the agenda for the party, whether it's Republican or Democrat, is the national leader of the party. Right now, we don't have one on the Democratic side, and that's normal. I mean, that's what happens. The other, God, I had another point now. I can't remember what it was. And it was really good.
Sure, brilliant. Well, let's see. I have a follow-up question to this. I'll just put to any of you who want to answer it. So therefore, are we landing in a place where the parties will continue to serve as the main organizing force in our democracy, or will movements or individuals?
That's where I was going.
Take some of this.
Exactly where I was going. Yes, the parties will continue to be the main organizing space and the main intellectual repository of broad themes for both parties, and they have to be. And the reason I say that is, I'm old now. I've been through a lot of third-party candidacies, and I'm an Obama guy, okay? I'm the original Obama guy. I'm the first guy hired by Barack Obama when he started to run for the Senate. And there was this idea with my friends in the Obama White House and around him that we were in a post-political presidency. and that politics, and it was all going to be different now. It's all going to be, it's like Fukuyama said, you know, it's the end of politics. But no, of course not. That's ridiculous. And what they did is they ripped the guts out of the Democratic Party, right? They killed it. And it's taken this long to try and rebuild the actual functions that a party does, which are necessary to run political campaigns and to motivate and organize people across the country and in the individual states, right? It's not just, although we are kind of a money laundering operation. I mean, I was executive director of the party.
My lawyer's watching. We are not.
Well, you know, of course we are, because there are legal channels through which money moves.
So, but can I just?
Well, okay, all right. So, and if you think that a third party can succeed, look what happened with Elon Musk. It's, you know, he has all the money in the world to set up all of the legal structures which would be incredibly expensive, which is why it's not been done. Even with virtually unlimited resources, he wasn't able to do it.
So I just think the trajectory of parties, Democratic Party, Republican parties, was, their failings was way before OFA. It really was. And I just think that, again, I think that Democrat, you were a Democrat or you were a Republican. It was actually, we've been a pluralistic country, right? People used to love to join groups and join churches and join parties, et cetera. And, people joined parties, and it was at the local level, and it was a county level, at state level. And that just doesn't happen. We're not in that type of environment now with the internet, with, social media, et cetera. If you go to a Democratic Party event or a Republican Party event and pick the county, it is a geriatrics ward. It's like going to church.
Yep.
Right? And so I do believe that this started way before. Now, you get someone dynamic like Trump, and, this is going to be a very short-term thing. Once he's done, you're going to have some of the same problems that we have. And if we get someone super dynamic, can we replicate kind of what Trump did and or Obama? We'd be happy to get there. Yeah. But in the interim, and what I think is long-term, really what we are is the Democratic Governors Association. Right? The Senate Majority PAC. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, in a campaign, if you have a Senate campaign, say John Ossoff in Georgia, or whoever's going to, Mike Collins maybe runs as a Republican, the independent expenditures in super PACs will spend twice as much money as the actual campaigns. So the campaigns don't even have control, quite frankly, of the dynamics of their races. And again, DGA, the Senate PACs, the House PACs, though that is what's driving, quite frankly, because of Citizens United, what might have been a party structure. So it's very fractured.
You know what we should do? We should talk about like where money comes from and what and it'll just take a second. And if you guys want to jump in and do it, yeah, please do. But I did this for a while for the House of Representatives. So the Federal Election Campaign Act, 1971, post-Watergate reforms to U.S. Code 431 et sec, states that corporations are not allowed to make political contributions to candidates and campaigns.
But corporations are people too, my friend.
Well, Citizens United. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. So you could make an individual contribution to a political campaign. A principal campaign committee, which is a term of art in the law, that's the campaign committee for the candidate, of no more than $1,000 per election, primary, general, runoff. Corporations could establish separate segregated funds, also a term of art. That's what we call PACs, political action committees. And they could solicit from their executive and administrative personnel and stockholders with beneficial interest up to $5,000 per, and they could make contributions to individual principal campaign committees of $5,000. So in theory, they could, and the corporations could pay the solicitation expenses for those PACs. In theory, everything that went into politics was individual money. People like you and me write a check, whether we wrote it through our corporation or our labor union or directly to the campaign. Then somebody had the bright idea that other committees could spend money, but it couldn't be coordinated. And the other thing is, up and down the chain between the state parties and the other ancillary party committees, you could coordinate, but only to a certain amount. And now I've forgotten what that was back then, but I've forgotten. Then somebody came up with a bright idea that there is, 501c3 organizations, charitable organizations couldn't contribute. 501c4 organizations, which are public interest not corporations, 501c4 organizations, which are nonprofits, but public interest nonprofits, could communicate in all kinds of paid communications to voters, but they couldn't use the magic words. They couldn't say vote for, vote against, elect, defeat. They couldn't do that, but they could talk about issues, but only up to 50% of their total expenditures. The rest of it had to be for bona fide public interest, activities. Along comes Citizen United, where the Supreme Court says, thank you, Mitch McConnell, the Supreme Court says, okay, well, if under Buckley v. Vallejo in 1974, money is speech, right? Then corporations have the right to speak politically. So essentially, corporations are
People.
individuals. They're people. It's crazy, but that's what it says. So now, Daddy Warbucks with his cigar and his board of directors can walk into Congressman Stuffingfudge's office, or Congressman Leghorn, Foghorn Leghorn. He can walk into his office and he can say, Congressman Leghorn, I want you to vote this way on this piece of legislation. And if you do, my corporation will spend $1 million in your campaign. And if you don't, we'll spend $1 million getting you beat. It's legal. You can actually do that.
I mean, you
think that
can't.
happens,
You
so.
cannot. I mean,
All right. Anyway,
it would
it's
be
the
wrong. I
Wild
mean,
West.
that would-
It is the Wild
It is
West.
the Wild West. And I've done it. I've actually done that. So yeah, you can do it.
That's not legal. Oh, my. Okay.
And on that note, yes, absolutely, Megan, absolutely.
Sense for you guys.
Yep.
Okay, so that's kind of where we are. That's when we talk about money, that's where we are.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
Right
After the 20,
right before 2012.
yeah, 2012.
I just,
cycle because they had a companion
Yeah.
bill to overturn the McLean-Feingold. The Supreme Court did not accept our case, Chairman of the RNC. They took up Citizens United instead, and that's how we got here. We did have a companion bill that would restore money flowing directly into national parties instead of the way McLean-Feingold limited that flow of funds. So the money in my estimation should always go to the state parties to flow through those committees, working with the ancillary committees. That is not our system anymore, which is why it is broken financially for Democrats and Republicans, because now third parties can set up their own game, bypass the political system, and put weight and pressure on candidates that otherwise would not be there.
totally agree.
Oh, let's keep going.
And it corrupts the two-party system. It breaks it down because everybody's trying to figure out a way to get money. The problem the RNC has, to tell you straight up, because of the integration of MAGA campaigning financing in the system, when Donald Trump is off the stage in 2028, the problem becomes how much more of that does he still control? Because it is his system. So yes, OFA was outside of the democratic process. MAGA was smart. Trump and his people were smart. They integrated it into the system. The problem for the party is when his time is up, what do you think he does? You think he leaves that infrastructure for the money to flow without any control or say who gets it from his system? That's the problem when you integrate the way the parties have in the last 15, 20 years.
That's a different panel.
So Megan,
Whole different panel.
you had something to add?
Your question was about like, will the set parties lead us forward, or will it be like an outside group or person? I think that the way the thing that comes with like the RGA and the DJs, like we actually have the principals with us. Like our governors are the members of our organization. And so we've seen a bunch of like outside Democratic groups like pop up over the years, especially after Trump's first election, but they don't have, frankly, sustainability or durability because they don't actually have the elected officials with them. So like the DSCC has the senators, we have the governors. You know, things like on the Republican side, maybe Turning Point Action are very influential or whatever, but it's not like they have elected leaders buy-in or like carrying their mantle forward the way that our set organizations do. Does that make sense?
It's hard. It's also like who's raising the money. So the candidates themselves raise the money. They raise money into the RGA, to the DGA. Like we have governors make specific asks on behalf of the RGA to give money to us. Like without a principal, it's hard to get that money.
Exactly.
Now that Charlie has gone at Turning Point, you know, there's a conversation of who's going to take over the mantle there. Turning Point has done a ton of work and has a lot of money and can do a lot of grassroots stuff. But what does the longevity of an organization like Turning Point look like without a strong principal at the top raising the money? And the principal, for all, I mean, there has to be an elected official. Like it's just hard to raise money if you're not.
True fact.
Can I just add one thing here that Citizens United, one of the most deleterious effects of Citizens United is it allowed these third parties to raise significant money, more money than the campaigns. Everybody complains about negative campaigning. Citizens United removed the onus, the responsibility of negative messaging from the campaigns. And those of us who are old enough to remember the Swift boat ads against John Kerry, if you hadn't had that third party organization, George W. Bush would have had to say, "I'm George W. Bush and I approve this message," right? But he didn't have to do that. In fact, he could look at that ad and say, "I have anything to do with that. I never said that." So it has given license for extreme negativity in campaigns for which there is no responsibility by the candidate.
So
Is that fair?
let's connect a little bit of this conversation with a little bit on the last panel, just in terms of the voting blocks and thinking about who some of the voters moving into the future are for both parties and what role the party has or our other structures have. I'm particularly thinking with this audience, like hearing a little more about some of the younger voters. And what we're seeing there in the upcoming elections, what we saw perhaps just in the last election. If I'm overlapping too much with the last panel and covering this, try to go in a slightly different direction if you would.
Yeah, I'll try to be really quick on that. Because you're young and you kind of know this and you probably feel it, is that you don't want to identify with a party anymore. Like the party identification of people under, 30 is, almost, depending on the state and nationally, can be up to, 50%. So you don't want to identify. You also, your trust level with every institution and every politician, including the media, is incredibly low. And so what motivates you to get out and vote is really difficult. Like I was surprised that young people actually got out to the level that they did. The other thing is I have 4 kids, 22, 24, 31, 33. And I ask them all the time, how do you get their news? It's so frustrating. I can't really get an answer, right? And I don't mean that to be critical to you all, but you're getting news in such a different way than us. And we are spending billions of dollars on digital political ads. And I think you're just clicking through them. I think older people like me are actually watching them at a higher rate. And so we are befuddled how to communicate to you. And I think how you do it, quite frankly, is the James Tallaricos of the world, or I don't know who it is on the Republican side, kind of catch fire, and you don't know why they catch fire. But they do. But the fact is that you're all a real mystery to us. And I can sit there and say, oh yeah, you're a target audience, but I have yet to find a media consultant, a digital consultant, a consulting consultant who really makes me feel confident that the communication dollars we're spending are actually resonating, number one, or actually getting to you to motivate you. I think that you are your own what's the word? Organism. Sorry.
One thing I will say, Donald Trump did a very good job with younger voters, better than any Republican ever has. And it's going to be really hard for us to replicate that down ballot. But he went on every single podcast that I had never heard of. I mean, he was going, like, young men, turned out for him in a way that we had never seen. And a lot of that, it wasn't paid advertising. It was him going on podcasts. It was him doing TikTok. It was him going on, like, YouTube. I don't even know what the hell they are. But and Barron was a big part of that. He had a very young team of organizers that helped him, identify some of these places that people had never really gone before. It reminded me a little bit of when Obama did a lot of that stuff when they rolled out ACA. He went on, like, Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis and, like, some of those kinds of things. It was very similar to that. So it's harder, though, to replicate that as, like, a gubernatorial candidate or someone running for Senate. You're not going to go on Joe Rogan's podcast.
And it's got to be authentic.
Yeah,
I mean, Bill Clinton went on Arsenio Hall. I mean, like, this is
Yep.
not new.
Yeah.
It's just a new medium.
Correct.
And I think Democrats think that he can replicate it by going on a podcast, and that's just not exactly the way it works.
We've been at the DGA able to experiment with this a little bit. I will say, even though the Democratic Party brand is, like, weak, we actually have really strong popular electeds in the party. Like, our Democratic governors are by far the most popular elected Democrats in the country. Like, governors in swing states and red states with approval ratings at like 60-65%, which is very, very high. And so I'm giving away some trade secrets here to my friend Sara, but, like, we decided after 2024, when obviously was a very challenging year for Democrats, and one of the big problems that I think the Harris campaign had is that they were trying to, like, really targeted specific messaging, like one message for Asian people, one message for Black people, one message for young people. And really, it's like everybody just cares about the same thing. And like, we weren't meeting people where they were, all that. So at the DG, we have a staffer whose only job, she's our in-house booker. We're the only committee to have done this. Her only job is to book governors in non-traditional media. And we just try it. It's like, we have nothing to lose. Like,
How's it going?
It's going great, actually. But I mean, like, we have govs on YouTube shows I've never heard of that I don't watch, but have 5 million views every time they go on. Podcasts I've never heard of, Twitch streaming, like, stuff I'm not engaged with, but people are engaged with, and it's working. Like, we tracked that in the first, like, basically 2 months of this program, we reached, I think it was like 3 million new viewers that we've never talked to before. And so it's one of the things I like about working with governors and at the DGA, because I, like, sometimes say the kids are running the camp. Like, I don't have, like, Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer in my office. Like, all the governors are in their states, and I get to just try things. And it's working. And so I do think we've learned a lot of lessons from 24, and we are trying to see new ways to engage with young voters. Yeah.
Oh, perhaps.
Right.
No one wants to work for me?
I didn't hear a no, Sara. They want to see you afterwards. No, that's really good. And Meghan, was it national and in-state folks that you were reaching? Like, did you have some targets that were those influencers or shows in states as well as national?
Yeah, I mean, in these past races in 2025, we worked with a ton of local influencers who were already talking about governor's race, like the governor's race, or already had some awareness of it, and we're talking on their platforms about it, or we're talking about things like affordability or healthcare, and we would reach out to them and be like, is there any chance you want to talk about, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey? And it really worked. And one of the nice things about governor's races, they happen every single year. And so they're like a 4-year, we have, like, think about governors on a 4-year cycle. So in 2023, we had 3 races. In 2024, we had 11. This year we had 2. Next year we have 36 governor's races in the country.
Pray for us.
Yeah. But the nice thing about that is you get to learn something every year and experiment every year. And unlike the federal, campaigns that are every 2 years, there's, like, a longer window to learn things.
JoDee, can I just also say one thing about young people that I think is very different from when I started polling, and even different from 10 years ago? That 18 to 29 cohort, I mean, they've been through a lot, with COVID, et cetera. But it's the first time I've felt is so palpable their economic concerns. Mm-hmm. It's not as much as pain points, but it's about their future, right? And it's like, okay, you used to go to college and you'd be, job was going to be there and stuff like that. And, you know, again, housing is kind of like the big thing, but it's this whole, not sure I'm going to do better than my parents, not sure that the stability of jobs are going to be there. And I think that there's much more anxiety about the path than I've seen in a long, long time, and with college and non-college voters, young people.
So any comments on how this might translate to the next presidential election or the next midterm elections in terms of some of the voting blocks and how you see folks putting this together? You touched on this a little in the last, but I feel like there's a little more for us to tease out here.
I think we've talked a lot about like what is the future of the Republican Party post-Trump. I think what is going to be fascinating to me is kind of to what Gerda said in the last panel is where is where are the Democrat primary voters and who is going to be the standard bearer when you come to nominate someone to run in 2028? Because, you know, is it going to be a governor? Is it going to be a AOC type, Mondami type person? How far do they get in a Democrat primary? What does that look like? Because I think that so much of the focus is who carries the mantle post-Trump. Well, who is going to emerge as the leader of the Democrat Party? I'm very fascinated to watch that.
Any other comments?
Well, I would just say that my experience in doing Biden's polling in the early months of 2019 is that you had Bernie Sanders, you know, super liberal. You had Buttigieg, who was young and new and dynamic. And you had Warren, who was like an ultra populist. And I just remember doing focus groups and having people say, you know, I want to be with Warren. I want to be with Buttigieg. I want to be with Sanders, but this guy can win. And Trump gets us pragmatic. And so you lose to Trump and you get super emotional, right? And maybe even unreasonable or even lefty, whatever. But let me tell you what, come 2027, Democratic primary voters, not us opinion elites, will get really pragmatic, I believe.
I agree.
I believe.
That's right.
And get matter of fact, if you take just self-ID Democrats nationally, 60-something% believe that the party should become more moderate. That should tell you something.
And the election results generally bear that out. I mean, it's the moderate who generally wins in the primary. Not always, but generally wins. And, you know, our Republican friends love to paint us as a bunch of wild, crazy liberals, you know, who are going to tear everything down. And the fact is that the people who win these races, generally pretty moderate. And I think whoever emerges, and it could be somebody we don't even know yet. You know, if I were guessing, I'd say on the Democratic side, it's going to be a governor because governors are executives and the presidency is an executive office and legislators are different animals. They're not executives. You know, you have a mayor, you have a governor, they're executives. Probably it's going to be a governor, but we don't know. And we don't know who governor it's going to be either. We don't know. Think about, except for Biden maybe, think about who's been the nominee. And also on your side of the aisle, on the Republican side too, a year out or 2 years out from the nomination, we were never thinking about Trump. We were never thinking about Bill Clinton.
Right.
Bill Clinton was just a blip. I mean, nobody even cared about him. Nobody cared about Obama. Everybody thought, you know, well, we made a splash at the convention and, you know, he was this young, dynamic senator, but nobody really took him seriously as a presidential candidate. So watch who's waiting in the wings.
Any other points before we head to questions?
Just that I think hard primaries make for better general election candidates. Like I'm pro primary. I think the Democratic Party is really desperate for a big presidential primary after what feels like sort of like heir apparent candidates for the last like 20 years. And yeah, obviously I hope it's a Democrat.
I love
governor.
hard Democrat primaries too. Dem on Dem crime. Love it.
I think for presidential primary, good for us. I will say also like, we obviously have some sort of really progressive firebrands like AOC and Mamdani and stuff, but they win in very closed environments that are very blue, you know, like our governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia, those candidates who are moderates won by much higher margins than Mamdani did in New York. You know, like that actually I think is the future of the Democratic Party. And I think that's what will happen in 2028.
Right. Do we have any questions? We have the back row. I'm nervous.
We got students, some students.
I
We got some
think I want
students.
to know.
We got
Oh,
students. What
too
are we
late,
doing?
Too late.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My mic's not, I don't even know. My question is, you guys have talked about the two-party system. It's not going anywhere. Hello, there we go. It's working now. You guys have talked about the two-party system and how it's not going anywhere. The question is, should it, right? Like, I think when I talk to young voters, now you guys shake your head if I'm wrong, that young people especially are like, the two-party system doesn't work. And it's set up to make sure that independent folks cannot come out and make a splash. And that's actually not good for democracy, or it's not working for young voters now. I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Why do you think the American people that's what going to ask the same question?
All right, well, you bring in the energy, very good, but let's turn to the panel.
Well, I mean, listen, I mean, start a party, see how it goes.
Yeah, you know why? You know why we don't listen to you? And this is gonna make you mad. And I'm sorry you don't vote. Get out and vote, and then we'll listen to you. I'm sorry.
I listen
but,
to you.
Know, I've been out on the sharp end of the spear for 35 years.
Water.
And we just ignore you because you don't matter.
Oh my God.
But you matter if you vote.
I think the big party problem about third parties is that you had Ross Perot, who was kind of an old white guy, right? I mean, like you have these third party attempts, like Ralph Nader, like an old white guy.
RFK.
You know, you have Michael Duggan, who's running as an independent in Michigan. He was a super good mayor for governor, but he's not exactly, you know, a young person. And so I'm not sure we've had the real experiment of a third party.
That's a good point.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Ron Paul was kind of an old white guy too. And so I just don't know if we've had a real experiment. You know, we've had people like Dan Osborne, who was an independent who ran for U.S. Senate. But again, at the end of the day, all the Republicans did was try to expose him as a Democrat, right? So, you know, I just think it's kind of untested, to be honest. We're going to see in Michigan governor's race. I mean, you know, Mike Duggan is the mayor of the biggest city. He's a white guy who literally was mayor of an almost entire African-American city. So it's going to be interesting. And I think he's going to have trouble gaining traction to the extent of where he can, you know, actually win. But the fact is, I'm not sure we've been tested with a young independent candidate.
It's good.
Any other comments before we go to the next question?
Sara and Meghan, because we know a presidential campaign election is really a series of 50 elections, right, in the states. And given that you guys are doing it, this is about the two-party system, how are you managing strategically against third parties on the ballot in a governor's race? And what do you think that portends in a presidential election? Because third parties exist and they play a role, right? So how are you guys seeing it play a role in the governor's races? And what do you think that tells us?
I mean, the reason why there's a Democrat governor of Kansas is because there was a third party candidate on the ballot challenging the Republican from the right. And so he took just enough votes to siphon off from the Republican to then elect a Democrat governor of Kansas. And, you know, then she was reelected just with two people on the ballot. But it's tricky for us to kind of navigate. I think that, I don't want to speak for Meghan, but Michigan will be a very, very interesting thing to watch. I know the DGA has put out a lot of statements saying that they are not happy about the Mike Duggan running as an independent because, let's be honest, he is the Democrat mayor of Detroit. He's been a Democrat his entire life. You're probably going to hear me say that a lot over the next year. And so, you know,
annoying for us.
It is. It's going to be annoying. We played a lot in 2022. We played heavily in the Oregon governor's race because there was a Democrat who was running as a third party in Oregon, and so we tried to see if we could make wave there. In Oregon, it's just too hard of a state for us to win. But yeah, it's very tricky. It's one of the more difficult things we have to navigate.
Also point you to Arizona next year where there'll be a competitive governor's race. Our Governor Katie Hobbs is up for re-election, where in 2024, No Labels, remember No Labels got on the ballot in Arizona, and they were able to now change how they're, and that works where you get to be on the ballot for 2 consecutive elections. So they're on the ballot in 2024 and 2026, but they just changed their party title on the ballot to the Independent Party. So so they can just pick a candidate to run in Arizona as the independent party, which should not be allowed. You should have to stay as the party you registered as, but that, I don't know what that looks like yet, but like it does create, like it does have an effect on electoral outcomes, like having those independent candidates on the ballot.
We have here and there. Oh, over there first.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, my name is Robert. I'm a social policy master's student here, and I study housing. So I've appreciated the various housing shout outs. It's good for my funding. But I had a question. So hopefully not steering too much into the previous question, but it seems to me that actually the place where third parties might be most valuable is in local elections. Because again, I study housing policy. There are a lot of cities with uniformly blue city councils where I think the lack of competition has made for worse governance and worse candidates. And actually there would be some benefit to like meaningfully introducing in very progressive places a working families party or a democratic socialist party that actually forces the Democrats to compete electorally and work on passing policy that's popular. So I was wondering if we could maybe shift away from the kind of state and federal talk and see about the possibility of third parties at the local level.
Where I think the answer of this is, I think you bring up a really great point. I love running or working on races that are nonpartisan. You don't have a Democrat or Republican. Sometimes they're mayoral races, right? Sometimes they're county exec, or et cetera, et cetera. And that's a real challenge, right? Because people have to speak to kind of everyone. Usually it's the top two and then there's a runoff. But I think that long term, you could have nonpartisan races that will kind of benefit the electorate because it will make those people running think and act differently and probably be much more attuned to the individual parochial problems in a city or in a county, et cetera.
We just saw mayor's races in Minneapolis and Seattle, for example, last week, where they're dominated by like Democrats on the city council and Democratic mayors get primaried from the left, and voters resoundingly chose the more moderate Democrat in that case. So it was holding those Democrats accountable, obviously, and having them answer for their vision of the future of the state. But I think you do see people try. It's not third parties. I guess it kind of is. I think in Minneapolis, it was a third party candidate primary, the Democratic mayor, and he won. Democratic mayor won.
We have two questions in the second row. So when you're done, just pass it down, okay?
Hello, it's me again. Since I've heard that it's from you guys that it's realistically impossible for like federal for like the major elections to like not change from the two-party system. Do you believe that third parties in our current government hinder and impede in voting and getting majority votes and also bring about alongside a bit of corruption? Mind you, I am a registered independent and have interest towards the Green Party.
What's the question, sorry?
Do you think that third parties in our current government impede like in getting the voter majority and like bring alongside a bit of corruption in voting as well?
I don't think they bring corruption, but I'm an establishment Democrat, and so I am pro. I sort of think that like the Republican Party tent is big enough and the Democratic Party tent is big enough that like if you identify with any ideals of the Republican Party, Democratic Party, like that, I would just suggest working sort of within the system to have what your goals delivered on. You know what I mean? So I think that sometimes independent candidates, I like almost feel bad for people who support them because they're not ever going to win and you won't get delivered what they're running on because they don't have electoral success, you know?
I think sometimes they create unholy alliances. I think if you take a look at where Cuomo got his money, right? There was just such, we got to stop Manabi, you know, who's talking about affordability. Maybe we should learn something about that. And, you know, so I think that there's just kind of unholy alliances, kind of dirty alliances. My guess is that, you know, if you really take a look at, you know, again, where his money and support, you know, comes from, you know, I think if you take a look at 2016, you know, is it Marianne Williamson? I mean, third parties probably cost Hillary, you know, in places like Pennsylvania, you know, there's always these, you know, people out there who are raising money and putting them to a third party candidate in hopes that, you know, it sucks stuff out. And, you know, I think she took some like crazy money and things like that. So, I mean, I think, again, it's more about unholy alliances. I don't know if it's corruption.
Well, they introduce a certain amount of distortion also. I mean, you think about, you can make a good case that if not for Ross Perot, Bill Clinton wouldn't have been elected. If not for Ralph Nader,
Right.
George W. Bush wouldn't have been elected. I mean, they introduce a certain amount of distortion, and ranked choice voting can correct for that. But we have to be willing to try that experiment, and we're trying that experiment in some states and cities, but not everywhere.
Right here.
From NYU. And a question I had was, we stated how Trump is the leader of the Republican Party system and kind of the force holding the Republican Party system. And then also that there's a lot of very strong elected officials in the DGA and within the Democratic governors. So are there any of those that might look out for? I know that Mamdani's name has been thrown around, but as you mentioned, he won in a very, very blue area. So in terms of who could potentially be leaders of the Democratic Party out of the governors, are there any names?
Oh my God, a lot of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how,
Walz.
Yeah.
listen,
Dan McKee.
Josh Shapiro's killing it in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not only a great messenger, but he has a really great empathy when, et cetera. Brashear from Kentucky.
Yep.
Again, he's like the master of emergency management, et cetera. He's winning in a southern state. Gretchen Whitmer, client of mine, incredibly authentic, and basically just day in and day out does her job, and now has a 63% positive job rating, right? I'm going to miss people, but even the former governors, Gina Raimondo was a former governor of Rhode Island and then Commerce Secretary, right? And watch her. She is going to be really good. There's a reason that Roy Cooper is the front runner in the North Carolina U.S. Senate race, because for 8 years he was governor and he was a really good one, and people still remember it. So, I mean, those are some, naturally the Gavin Newsom and the J.B. Pritzkers who are more in the resistance category. I'm not saying that critical, it's just, it is what it is. But, that's a damn good universe. And I will also throw in there Wes Moore, who's the governor of Maryland, African-American, and incredibly impressive. And I think you're going to see him, test the waters as well.
Rhodes Scholar.
Excuse me?
He was a Rhodes Scholar.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
You will notice both parties, Democrat and Republican, they often, the Senate committees are, their number one recruit is whoever the governor is. They want them to run for Senate because the governors, when they leave office, by and large, are popular. It doesn't matter what party they're in.
Okay, question right over here.
Hi
ahead.
guys, thank you for being here. My name's Elon. I'm at Oxford. Question, will the next election, how big of an issue will trade and immigration be? Where are most Americans on those issues? Where will the Democratic Party be?
Just an easy answer. Get your crystal ball out.
It's the number, in focus groups, is the number one positive that people give for President Trump. Like when you ask, they love his action, they love his strength, they love that he sealed the border. They blame Biden 100% for opening the border. So, you're going to see it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I think that you're going to, how it's going to play out in the 2026 elections aren't going to be the old fights. It's all going to be about ICE, right? And it's all going to be about criminals and things like that. And what was your other issue? Well, I mean, listen, the bottom line is 70% of Americans believe that the tariffs are going to increase costs. They don't necessarily feel it right now. We're about to come up to Christmas, so be ready. And again, Trump's greatest strength is that he's the economy president, and people think that he has this kind of magic fairy dust. And his greatest strength could become his greatest weakness. And you probably will see that more in 2026. But you're seeing it in his job rating on the economy and on tariffs are in Biden territory. It's just that people are still giving him a little time. So, you never want as a politician your greatest strength to become your greatest weakness. That will be bad for the generic Republicans all around.
Yeah, we blew it on the border. Okay, let's just say it straight out. We blew it, but not on immigration. And see, they're two different things.
Don't conflate them.
And you can't conflate the border with immigration. So yes, we should have absolutely enforced the border. No question about that. We were wrong. Trump was right, and he did it. And he proved that you could do it. You could stop that illegal flow of immigration. But, and I don't remember the number now, but it's nearly 70% of Americans believe that a person, whether they are documented or not, if they've lived here for an extended period of time and they have a job and they're a part of the community, they should have a path, if not to citizenship, at least to stay here and work and raise their families. And they believe that children who were brought here, the DACA kids that were brought here, that runs to like 90, well, not 90, but about 80% of people who believe if you're a DACA kid, yeah, man, you should get some love. All right, you should be able to stay here. The response, the public response to the ICE raids and National Guard being deployed in the cities, that's a vulnerability for Republicans nationwide. So don't conflate the border with broader immigration issues.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, very good. Okay, right behind you, Lynn.
I may have those numbers wrong. I'm not.
Yep, right.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lily. I'm from San Francisco. And so my question pertains to what we've been talking about with young voters, and particularly to a generational shift that you can all enlighten me on if I'm correct in this or not. But my dad talks to me a lot about how when he was my age, politics was kind of considered taboo, similar to maybe religion or economics. And I found it interesting what Meghan was saying about how there's a, I guess, campaign or kind of an idea of introducing politics into the type of like atypical media that we consume every day. And so I find it interesting then that there's such an apathy among people my generation when I find that every day when I open my phone, I can immediately at face value find people that I see every day commenting on political issues in a way that it feels very easy to access. So I'm curious what you all think the long-term implications of having such accessible political media would be for our generation, and also kind of what it means or what that will mean long-term to have politics infiltrate our everyday people that we consume media from.
That's the next path. Go ahead.
Okay, my apologies.
It's a perfect segue.
Yeah, it is.
Perfect segue.
Any comments here before we close on that or otherwise? Yes, please.
I just think that social media is just this power.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a Lily who's a senior in college, and she didn't like her boyfriend's answer on Trump, and so she studied on social media his economic policies, sat him down, and said, "What do you like about his economic policies?" He couldn't answer, and so she told him what the tariffs would do to his father's business. Like, right? Isn't that a powerful social? So the fact is that it empowers you. What's that? Well, they're not dating anymore, which is really awesome. But I mean, again, I mean, we know it's really powerful. It's just that we don't know how to
Harness it.
Thanks. That's exactly harness it, and we're scared that you're harnessing it. So anyway, if it's the next panel, maybe we'll go from there.
Give him a microphone. Give him a microphone.
God, I love
it. I think that what young people taking my job, I think that what young people, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong because I'm no longer one of you, you guys don't see electoral power as like the most important power to gain in the world, right? You don't see it as the only way to change the world or change the world around you. And so, do you agree? I see head shaking. So when, like going to vote, and so when you say like they don't go vote, it's true, but that's because they have so much more access to changing the world in different ways. And social media is only making that easier for you guys to do that, and worse for all of you who are practitioners and trying to get young people to vote. And
I don't care if young people vote, so just to be clear.
As you guys know, the Republicans love an old person, honey.
Sarcasm. Sarcasm.
To be very clear.
Thank you.
But I think so when the challenge that politicians have right now is figuring out how to not over-index on going on these random podcasts and things because it doesn't always end up to, it might sometimes waste folks' time. Not always, Meghan, but sometimes it wastes the candidate's time because it doesn't turn itself into votes, while at the same time figuring out how to get to you guys and get you guys interested in electoral politics by exciting candidates, people like Mamdani. Maybe not his policies, but like the way that he operated is something that both Republicans and Democrats could take a lesson from. I mean, I suffer from political fatigue and I'm a millennial. I think so, right? Because all day long, exactly. Yeah, I get paid. All day long, your phone is seeing political fights and it's nastier and nastier and nastier. Y'all a little more sensitive than my generation even was. And so it appears that like the voting as older people start leaving us, that I am worried, leaving. I don't know where they're going. Oh yeah, correct. And I say, yeah, when they unregister from voting in life, I think it's possible we might just see less and less interaction with politics because the young people are going to start being the 30s and their 40s and 50s and 60s, and they've gone through a world where politics was so nasty that you're going to be actually maybe less interested in voting. That's a concern that I have.
Oh, yeah. So this is a perfect setup. Now, I'm going to say, I'll stand up. This is the perfect segue to the next segment because I disagree with that last part. And there's a reason why I disagree with that last part because it goes to the question that was not, in my view, appropriately answered on independents and third parties. That is the future of our country. And I can tell you why it won't happen. It's not happening now, and it has to do with the Democrats and Republicans not really interested in having it happen. So we can talk about that when we come back.
Can I just, hey, Lynn, can I do one other thing? Just that.
That's my big message. We're going to segue right to the next because we're so aflame with the brilliant.
That's right.
Just heard.
Good energy.
John's going to say.
Say, Lily and the rest of you, the one thing I hope social media doesn't do is I hope you don't go into your corners, because if you don't know Trump voters, if you're a Democrat, that's crazy. And if you're a Trump voter and don't know Harris voters, those should be your friends, like, right? I don't care what the proportion is, but I think it's important.
So right about it.